I despise the beady little eyes of them. I despise the crooked little smiles of them. Execution of a useless plan. Execution of a worthless man. Oh, I forgot to grab the link. Hold on. There we go. Fools in the Discord. I am streaming. Yes. I saw the trailer. A new Music Man. He has a giant music box in his mouth. I thought it was like a meat grinder at first, but no, it's a music box tumbler. How is that? Yeah, I can turn down. Alright, we got the fox. We got the car. It's midnight motoring time. So this is going to be another kind of like no direction, just Subway Surfers-ass gameplay in the background. So yeah, we have Secret of the Mimic trailer, finally. It's really nice to finally get a look at the game after kind of knowing a little bit about what it was, but not really getting a good picture of it. My guess was that they just didn't feel confident in whatever demo they had at PAX to make that the trailer. Or this is another, like, something kind of similar to Security Breach where they had some contract and stuff with Sony that had to make it go a certain way. That would be my guess. No, it's set in the 1970s because the initial teaser of it called it 1979. But also, yes, the technology is reminiscent of 1970s computing, MS-DOS and all that. Like, there's a very specific look to the DOS era computing. It lasts a little bit longer, but like processors get enough to do graphics that are more than just like 3 colors after this, like in the 80s. So eventually you start getting stuff that's closer to like what we think of as a video game or like a digital sprite. So yeah, it's very clearly trying to stick to the 1970s, the late 70s kind of feel and vibe. My kind of only question with that is why? I'm not entirely sure what that bit is for. Because, like, yeah, obviously, Tales from the Pizza Box, it was also set in 1979 with the Mimic. Or it was set in the vague 70s, early 80s. But that was kind of underexplained and underdeveloped, and it wasn't really clear what that was for either. I wonder what, like, where we're going with this whole 70s bit. Oh, that was my microphone. That can't sound good. I have not seen the new game theory, the new FNAF game theory. I need to do another like Vega reaction collection where I just like did like the last 5 game theories I didn't properly watch. Because I've just been like really procrastinating watching them in particular. Right now, a lot of my time is spent doing other shit than like YouTube stuff. I am working in. I have finished a few pages of Freddy and Friends. Those will be seen once. Whatchamacallit? Once YouTube is caught up with the chapter again, because I decided to re-release the Ladies' Night chapter as a whole, because I feel like it's one of those, like, you need kind of the context of the rest of the episode to kind of make sense of where the final few sequences go. It's also because I did a bit of a rewrite for the second, or for the last third of Ladies' Night. Because I had a plan for it, but I realized that would run on, like, the plan I had was going to run on for, like, another 10, maybe even 20 pages. And I'm like, that pacing-wise isn't good. It really, the only reason it ran on that long was to extend out chase sequence with Twisted Wolf. And I realized I could fit all the gags I had planned into like one scene. Like there was going to be this whole thing where the entire Wolf gang would be chasing Roxy and the gang as like an elaborate Midnight Motorist joke. But I'm like, you already kind of get that bit just by the sheer concept of Twisted chasing Roxy. Like, in their cars at night, like, you already kind of get that joke. So I'm like, well, I don't need to do that bit. I don't need to drag it out. Yeah, the tech is from the 70s, but my guess is the game is probably set in like 1970 something, or 1980, like 1, 2, 3, that kind of range. I do really wonder if this game was what Into Madness is going to be like. Because if you think about it, while the gameplay is a lot more like Ruin and Security Breach from the looks of it, the setting feels a lot more like what I would imagine a final Scott FNAF game to kind of look like. Because that's what it's worth remembering. Into Madness was not, because when that whole blog post was made, it was talking about the various projects upcoming FNAF, and some of them were books that were really unfinished. Like Fazbear Frights wasn't even announced yet when that post was made. So it was just called A New Book Series. And then it was a AAA FNAF game, and that ended up not going anywhere, it seems like. Security Breach kind of is the AAA FNAF game, but it's more of it's a AA, I would argue, scale-wise. Or even just a single A. But it kind of filled that slot, and then the AR project ended up happening and going. And then we had the VR game, which ended up being Up Wanted. But Into Mad, like, not only does Mad just kind of fit the vibe of the Mimic, but, like, I could imagine Scott making that toy factory, like, mascot shop, and making a more traditional FNAF game out of it. Just with not wandering around. It would just be, like, almost like a Jolly game, where you're just kind of doing segment by segment, and you have your core gameplay between it all. Or maybe, like, a more assisted location style thing, where you're just going like task by task by task while there's the current threat around. But who knows? We'll never exactly know what Into Madness was until we get like a later Scott interview or something that confirms it. 'Cause we're still going to get those, it seems like. And I really hope we get some confirmations about Fazbear Entertainment. We haven't really gotten a lot of explanations about it. Like, for example, one question is, who where does Fazbear Entertainment come from in this story is the big one. Because that's something that's been on my mind on a few scripts I've been toying with lately is, on one hand, you would want to say it's just the company that William and Henry own. But not only does Secret of the Mimic put that into question a little bit already, and has kind of been putting that into question since that PAX Count demo, which I never got to play, but from what I have heard about it in the description of it, kind of implies not only was there Fazbear's Family Diner, but like between the Mimic short story and Secret of the Mimics, like what was talked about it sounds like there was a Fazbear Entertainment before Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, as strange as that sounds. And that raises the question of what the hell was it? And who owned that? And how does that connect to Fazbear's Family Diner? Because Fazbear's Family Diner was stated to be in FNAF World where it all started. And also, FNAF 2 called it the original owners. Which, like, raised the question to me, like, where did this all belong to, and who did it belong to? Like, what happened? And I'm wondering if the new Andy Field character is like an like some people were talking about this in my comment section on that video, on my reaction video. But I'm wondering almost if this new CEO character is, or not, this new hand unit character is like the original CEO, like, because remember, a CEO is not the owner of a company necessarily, typically. So he could be the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment, and William and Henry are the original owners of the brand or company. And then we have, like, Edwin Murray apparently being a Batman villain for what he's capable of inventing out of nowhere or nothing. It reminds me of this one Spider-Man story where Mysterio tricks Spider-Man into thinking he's been shrunk down on a model set of a amusement park, and how he did it was he had a model set of an amusement park already. He like gassed Spider-Man while he was looking at that model set, and then when Spider-Man wakes up, he was actually, while asleep, transferred to an amusement park that was the exact same as the model. And then Mysterio made a giant Mysterio robot version of himself so he could convince Spider-Man that he was really small and Mysterio was standing over the table to attack him. It's like one of the most elaborate, absurd reveals ever for a single individual person to pull off. And for, like, no reason, by the way. Like, this isn't part of a scheme other than to confuse Spider-Man. Like, Mysterio, like, Green Goblin gets, like, the most shade as, like, the #1 Spider-Man hater. Second, I guess, like, J. Jonah doesn't like Spider-Man. He does hate him in Phantom Menace. But he just wants Spider-Man to be brought to justice and to be held accountable for whatever he does. Green Goblin genuinely wants Peter dead and, like, hates Peter Parker at his core. But then Mysterio will do all this insane, petty bullshit in the comics. It's like, okay, you get the 3rd place trophy shared with Doc Ock for #1 for the biggest Spider-Man haters. And that is, like, the level Edwin is at right now for technology of, like, how did you make this? As I said in the reaction video, I don't care if he canonically made that giant Music Man on his own. I refuse to believe a broke, small, gnomish man, as he's described in the original stories, that made vacuum cleaner robots jumped in the span of a few years to making giant metal spider robots with a giant music box tumbler in its mouth. That thing is so comically huge that I'm like, what were you planning to use this for? I don't even think amusement parks could use this thing. Unless there is a Freddy Fazbear amusement park, then I could kind of see what it would be used for, but, like, as far as we know, it's only ever been the diners and restaurants And then, like, there's a water park really later on in the timeline, and then there's the Mega Pizzaplex later in the timeline. So what was the original giant Music Man used for? It's so weird that thing exists, but I don't mind it because it's another FNAF card. And I love making the Music Man cards because they're so nonsensical and weird that to try and, like, they're not an archetype at this point. Their mechanics just don't make sense together because none of the Music Men are, like, consistent. Conceptually, really. Like, maybe if I had went back, I could find some way to spin all the Music Men together, but, like, DJ Music Man's only mechanic in the Ultimate Custom Night was that he made noise, or is that he got more aggressive the more he made noise, so he was a kill switch if he made some noise. And then DJ Music Man is like the opposite. He wants you to play music, and then he crawls around the pizzeria trying to attack you. And then Rude Music Man is just the same, but I guess technically more dangerous. And he has a lot more of his little deep mini Music Man goon. And stuff. So, like, I couldn't really justify exactly what they all did together. Weirdly enough, DJ Music Man might be good in a Mimic deck where you're constantly spamming once per turn effects. But I guess so maybe I can work something in with the Secret of the Mimic Colossus guy. It's all nonsense. I don't know what the hell's going on with that. With the apparently the Steel Wool, because they put up a page for it today. They put up a page that called it Murray's Costume Manor. So I don't know if this is supposed to be the factory that the original Mimic short story was set in or not. Because it feels like it should be, but also it is so much more detailed and extravagant and has so much more crap in it. I think I said this, but maybe not word for word, in my reaction video, that it's like, it feels like we're doing Tales games until we decide, fuck it, no we're not anymore. Like, yeah, Tales is more or less canon, now, or not now, has been. But it seems like they're completely willing to change details for whatever they want. Like, it does not seem like we're super held to the standard of everything in Tales is going to be one-to-one what's going to be in the canon. And that's been kind of true for a bit. Like, even in the early Tales games argument, we had small inconsistencies that we knew for a fact were there. It was just a question of, like, did those matter enough to say this was or wasn't canon? And I think I'm leaning on, they technically don't, but if something is contradicted by the games, that's the canon version. I think that's honestly how I'm just going to apply almost every short story now. Except for a few of the specific ones where I'm like, I don't know how you fit this anywhere in the storyline. What we found is the most extreme example of this to me. Because just nothing about that story fits. Like, you can't even say it's a retelling of FNAF 3. It's just not. Like, the things needed to happen in FNAF 3 just don't occur in that story, aside from Fazbear's Fright has a spring trap, and there is a night guard. But there's dumb stories like Coming Home, while it was treated as impossible to be in Stitchline because of a few lines of dialogue that don't make a lot of sense, if we can get stuff like the Mr. Hippo Fridge Magnet being just wrong, or Edwin's factory being very different and extravagantly, like, detailed and filled with all this crap, despite the fact that he was like supposed to be a relatively modest if talented inventor, implies to me that like if we want to do something in the games, that's how it works. So I can see stuff like the gist of Susie's story is still canon, even if some details are just incorrect. That's kind of how I'm going to interpret a lot of Fazbear's rights for now until the foreseeable future. And A Return to the Pit's another example of this, where it's like, yeah, the 6 kids were kind of wrong, at least how they were handled in the original story. But, like, the gist of the story is still mostly there, it's just tweaked in a few areas. Which, like I said, kind of implies to me. Oh, that was, like, the first time I had, like, a real interaction with an eraser as if it was an actual normal kart racer. Instead of this sort of pseudo-time trial system the game actually comes from. Because a lot of times the other racers don't matter in this game. There's supposed to be a placement tracker on the top left that shows where I am relative to the other racers, and I'm so far ahead of them every single race that it never even shows anyone anymore. I might as well be playing a single-player game 9 times out of 10. I will say, I think I'll have more to... So, I've mentioned the FNAF PCG a few times because of the trailer. It's exciting for me because it seems like this will be a game great for the FNAF PCG. I was a little worried for Set 4 that I wouldn't have enough content this time around, but with it coming out June, we have Escape from the Pizzaplex to kind of fill out the time gap, and we have, whatchamacallit, we have whatever Megacat is working on in the background. So that's, I feel like collectively there will be enough for me to work on. And also the FNAF 2 movie is going to have a lot of shit in it. Like, I'm going to be able to do an entire, presumably, we're still going to have Golden Freddy. I see no world where Golden Freddy doesn't make an appearance for that movie. Which means, aside from maybe Balloon Boy, we'll have every character from the game version of FNAF 2 present in the second movie. And we have decent odds of having Springtrap there. So, like, all in all, like, the FNAF movie will have a lot of characters and parts for you to adapt. Secret of the Mimic looks like it's going to have a ton of Mimic variants for me to adapt, which, granted, will kind of suck gameplay balancing-wise, because that would mean there's really just a shit ton of Mimic support out of nowhere that I have to work with. We'll have a new Helpy for me to work with. We'll have maybe our player character if they have an identity, or maybe they're just generic, like, just meant to be some person, like Joe Schmo kind of bit. But I hope our character is actually, like, a person, not just, oh, generic filler character meant to be the one who happened to be there that day to get them. Because you know that's how that game has to end. Is either we die to the Mimic, and we're supposed to be like Team 1 or 2 from the short story, or we're going to be the ones who actually get the Mimic acquired Fazbear Entertainment. Because we know they get it, we know they deactivate it at some point, so it's not infallible. So I hope whoever we are is someone like worth tracking, like a character someone I can make a card out of. Gameplay balance wise, because I always want
more humans in the game. I have this like big thing where I want the flavor of the FNAF TCG, because every card game or thing has sort of a flavor of like who we are behind the scenes. You know, in Yu-Gi-Oh, you're these like powerful pharaoh kind of people or entities, you commanding these creatures to attack and fight on your behalf. That's why it's your life points that go up or down whenever fighting happens, and you get a direct hit. In Magic, you're the commander of an army, and once again, it's your health pool that's going up and down. And sort of the bit of the FNAF TCG is that you are both building out your opponent's animatronic antagonists for their game, and you are defending your own with your own cast of characters, and they kind of represent who you are playing as. So like when you play a Mike card, that is kind of meant to be the perspective of you being Michael in that moment. And then when he dies, much just like how you can try again in FNAF, that's what that kind of represents. It's like, oh, well, next game, whatever, new character, and all that. Like, the idea is you're playing FNAF, and you'll kind of get another person almost. That's like, and that's a very loose flavor. It's much like for the Pokemon TCG, where it's like, who the hell actually are we in the Pokemon card game? No one really knows. We play trainer cards, so we're not actually a personal trainer, but we're commanding Pokemon like we're a trainer, so I guess we're the player of a Pokemon game or something like that. You know, you have to sort of bend the rules a little bit, flavor and design wise. For it to work and make sense. And, how is one guy going to beat the Mimic when no one else can? I don't know. How did William manage to disassemble 4 animatronics with basically nothing but his wits and a basic trick of their AI when dozens of Night Guards had died prior to him? It's just like some people are just built different in the series. It's protagonist bias. The reason we're following this guy in the game is because they are the one who actually finally pulled it off and stopped the Mimic. Because the Mimic really, I mean, the Mimic is a physical threat, but it's been established a fair amount that the Mimic is not infallible intelligence-wise. That is kind of where it falls short. And it's part of what makes the like characters like the puppet so scary in the series is the puppet's not only strong enough to kill a human being, but is like she's fully aware of almost everything around her. And same thing with Golden Freddy. It's like Golden Freddy is just nonsensical supernatural powers at its core, but it's the intelligence and guided force behind it. We see tons of supernatural entities here. Plushtrap Chaser is a supernatural entity in this series, technically. However, it is basically a mindless, screaming goon meaning to attack and lash out at people. Whereas Golden Freddy and other supernatural forces in the series actually use their powers to their full effects and are completely capable of killing people. The Mimic isn't like that. He is a scary, somewhat intelligent physical endoskeleton, but there are very clear limits to how he thinks and understands. He is not cool. So we just need to be the one guy who tricks him and fucking turns the button on the back of his neck off or whatever. Like, power scaling doesn't really fit in FNAF. I have to kind of do it a little bit in the FNAF TCG just for like gameplay reasons. But even then, I'm like, William is the same level of danger in the FNAF TCG as Mini Arena is in Biddy Bap. So it's like the scaling is goddamn nonsense. It's the fact that some characters can do what they do in the series does not mean much or make much sense. Turn down the game audio a bit. Why does it sound that loud? This is on 2 volume for me. Why is Streamlabs scaling up the audio so loud? Okay, I think I fixed the problem. I think I got it. But yeah, I just realized, like, watching the audio monitoring, and I thought it was fine because it didn't sound that bad in the reaction. But I changed some audio settings around my computer. One of the main reasons being I got a new PC case that had all of the stuff in it transplanted to that case. And so the volume scaling is a little off right now because it's different settings. Like, so in my original setup that I had for basically all of 2024, my headphones were actually plugged into my monitor because there was a glitch in the Realtek audio system on my old PC case. It was something about the drivers on that motherboard. It also has a new motherboard. Something about the drivers there were screwed up. And even when reinstalling, it's like they would constantly ask me questions like, oh, do you want to change this setting? Do you want to change that? I'm like, I just want them to be the same. And it kept fiddling with stuff without me choosing to. Whereas it seems to work now if I just directly plug it into the motherboard this on the back port. I mean, it's really hard to ignore Tails being beer canon, if not canon now. Like, the closest you can get, like I said, is it being the term soft canon, and the idea of soft canon is, like, it is intended to be in the continuity of whatever thing in question, just the devs of the main project are willing to change and rework things around for whatever they want. So in this case, like, yeah, the original short stories and stuff might as well be canon, but if Scott and Skill will have a new idea and want to change one part of that story, it seems like they're fully willing to, for whatever reason necessary. And I don't think that's a bad thing, if I'm completely honest. I think that's a completely reasonable thing to do in a story and series like this, where it's like, rather than try and force all developers to be to the same super specific limitations, letting them change details that are more or less irrelevant around, I don't think is that crazy. I just wish that was made more clear earlier, because that was what was annoying me was in the early Tales games arguments was like none of that information was present directly in the games other than heavy speculation. And a lot of the contradictions were like, but why would it be like that? And not be explained to us. Like, what? It was more annoying that we weren't told it was canon, aside... Ooh, that was a crash. It was more annoying to me that we weren't told it was canon, and the only thing that implied Tales was canon early was specifically the one... early back of the all right, okay, it was weird that it wasn't like the early Tales from the Pizza Plex back of the cover said like from the world of the newest games, but then that wasn't in the final version of the books, which implies to me like they changed their minds or something weird happened. But like, nah, I don't think they're canon because like, wouldn't they just be called canon? Like, why would they remove that part of the back cover? And then there was like the maybe slash probably fake Anton we know now. But we didn't know it was fake for a long time. I was like, oh no, the original back of the cover still matters, guys. Don't worry about it. But no one could prove I was wrong really at the time. Aside from being a Scholastic or Steelwool employee, who knows if people would believe you over famous Anton leaker Anton. Not famous, but well known within a certain community that cared about that. It was this whole messy thing, and I also think a large part of the Tales debate was, for so long, being a Frights games or Stitchline games fan was being such an extreme vocal minority that I think that group became not only extremely tight-knit but extremely defensive of their standpoint, to a very frustrating degree for anyone else. And likewise, people who supported the games all being just the sole canon, basically, minus a few exceptions, had sort of just accepted that as fact, and challenging that fact was super difficult. So all in all, it was a really rough thing just to force upon the community without stating it cleanly. Because up until Ruin, the debate kind of didn't matter. Because we didn't know what the point of the Mimic was in the short story. And the Stitch Wraith kind of resolved its own plotline entirely. So, like, it could have been canon, but it also could not have been. And the only thing that one really changed was the events of Open Custom Night stuff. And all that. So it's like, it was kind of a pointless debate that got heated up more and more the more information came out. And I still, to this day, don't know why there was no official statement on continuity. There still isn't one technically. We can assume Tails is more or less canon now, because we have Edwin Murray name dropped directly, and David's Tiger, and the Mimic, and everything's pretty spot on minus a bunch of additions. But it's like, why? What was the point of not mentioning that right away? Let me check chat some. How do you feel about people splitting FNAF into eras? It kind of makes sense, but I think there are going to be some limitations to it, because, like, we count the Glitch Trap era as separate from the Mimic era, for example. Because those technically are one related continuing story. However, Glitch Trap does kind of function as a different split of the character and narrative. Like, he is his own arc that just happens to, like, connect to the Mimic arc. Because he technically is a variant of the Mimic scene. Like, likewise, people sometimes split the original trilogy from FNAF 4 through UCN as, like, its own separate sub-chunk. I've seen some, like, it kind of depends on what you count as an era. I will say, from a non-meta standpoint, or I should say from a more meta standpoint, I do consider there a sort of Scott era, and I wonder if I can get sub 4 on this. A Scott era and a post-Scott era. I do kind of hope I don't know, I was going with that. sometimes I start a sentence and I'm like, I can figure out how I get to where this word I've said goes. And then there are many times where I can't. Okay. Well, let me try that again. Yeah, I consider like the Scott era every game he had made up to Ultimate Custom Night, and then it kind of changes after that. Like, it's still his story at its core, and there's still parts that connect between all those chunks of the story. But it is a different vibe and feel to the release order and the methodology behind it. I wouldn't say that means you can completely solve everything without each other, though. Like, I to an extent you can, I think. Like, there is a solvable version of the story up to each game, but there's still always new plot lines, developments, and stuff being added to the story in the world. I'm trying to think of an example of the series where like that kind of applies too. Where it's like, actually, here's one. Like Dragon Ball functions like that, where it's like, if you just watched original Dragon Ball or read the original run of the manga prior to Z, it would all work as one story. Of Goku becoming the #1 under the sun. That's kind of his original arc. And then Dragon Ball Z initially expands upon that by like kind of concluding like, oh, what was the deal with some of these abnormalities with Goku? Like, where did he come from? And who were his parents and stuff like that? And then that expanded into its kind of new arc, where we sort of play with some of Goku's morality and question some of the lessons we learned in Z. And then we also get the rise of Son Gohan, which goes nowhere after the Cell Saga. And then Cell Saga feels... Or the Buu Saga is the only point where I'm like, this story kind of feels weird in terms of how it connects and expands upon the prior. Like, it has relevancy, but it doesn't feel like as much as a one story that fits in with everything else. Though it's not bad. It's not terrible for that. It just doesn't have, like... The Cell Saga hits, not only because it's a well-made storyline, designs are good, and because the powers and fights or anything. I feel like it hits because we've seen this kid who started his introduction as like this whiny brat fully come into his own and see what we've been teased all this time develop. And we kind of get this promise that, like, much like when Goku unlocks Super Saiyan, even if it comes from rage at first, he knows how to handle it. And we know from who Gohan is. Whereas the Buu Saga, it's like, okay, so not only we're kind of undoing that with Gohan, but we brought Goku back, which feels like him leaving now doesn't really matter as much. And Super tries some stuff and it does some cool stuff, but it feels like the Cell Saga was the last time there was like this plays into the story of Son Goku. That makes sense. Okay. And I think I would prefer the Buu Saga as Gohan kind of training Goten and Trunks. Or something like that. I know that would be weird and a very different story, but I would like if that was kind of the bit, and like Goku could still chip in and chime in and help and all that, and you can still have a lot of story be the same, but like Gohan and Trunks, or Goten and Trunks feel a little underdeveloped for what they're initially set up to be. But that's a whole separate point. I do FNAF though in a very similar way. It's like, yeah, you can go through FNAF with just the original trilogy and that will get you a complete story. But 4, 5, and 6, and Ultimate Custom Night all have their own impact on the story. They are all clearly set in the same world. Even this is something that's weird to go back to in hindsight is people weren't initially sure Sister location was part of the game. People were like arguing this part of the novel continuity because those names really mapped it, but like William couldn't be the name of the killer or whatever. In some ways, it's funny how the series kind of never changes in that way. Like, it just happened that the book not being the same company as the game ended up being Canon route, whereas we had the whole reversal of that with Fazbear Frights and Tales. The Tales, the Frights is still like, I'm still curious about what was going on with some parts of it. Like, some of it makes sense to an extent where I'm like, yeah, I can see that fitting on the game continuity. But then there's something like, this doesn't really imply to be in the same world. So I just want Scott to say, like, what the fuck he was thinking with the continuity of Frights. Like, what was the point of keeping it all ambiguous and questionable? Was it just for the soft canon reason of like, hey, we don't want people to hard commit to these books too much? Was it just... This would suck, and it's kind of a shitty thing to do, but like, I can almost see a thing of, we know Security Breach is getting delayed a lot, so rather than say this is or isn't canon, we keep it ambiguous and keep people talking about these short stories because they're kind of the only thing out for a while. And then it doesn't explain Tales very well, because Tales also was like, it dropped so many implications that were just not in the base game of Security Breach. That's, okay, so what was the point of making these reveals exclusive to one or the other? Look, I'm still not 100% sure what happened there. I know people, like, it's kind of an unwinnable situation because Scott does anger people kind of no matter what direction he goes, story-wise, but also, like, not saying something doesn't fix the problem. You know, just because I don't admit there's one... Let me put it this way. Yes, by not giving a clear answer, it doesn't... It gives people room to believe one way or the other, and thus allows some people to not be pissed off right away. But it doesn't mean there isn't an ultimate truth. For example, like with Tales, if Tales is canon, why not just say it and rip the bandit? Why get people to fight and talk about it instead? Something like that. I can 412 again. It's worth noting, when Scott said he preferred sci-fi stuff, he meant more like it's his default when writing a story to do sci-fi, rather than it's what he thinks the series should be. Because he even said, like, he tried to get, like, steer back away from that after Sister. The whole part of what he said was, like, Sister Location was the overcorrection of sci-fi, because that's how his brain kind of naturally works storytelling. Which you can see in some projects and stories like Destiny of Hope. The thing I'm interested in kind of observing, the base mini turbo of FNAF is actually really strong. I almost wonder if it's better to chain all mini turbos together while you still have whatever momentum. Like that, rather than build up one big one like you would normally do in Mario Kart, which is usually better. Usually in Mario Kart it's better to like build up one big one than what I did there. Now I'm not sure. there are some areas where I don't think you can pull off multiple moves stuff. Just like outright objectively physics-wise. Areas like that where there's a lot of flexible room for what you can do. Not so. I hope they fix the weird bouncing physics the game has, admittedly, because like I don't mind the parts of bounce and have like, physics like that. What I mind is that it cancels momentum some when it feels like it's not supposed to. Oh, and FNAF isn't going to be another thing that's going to have a lot of great art space to work with. Oh. Like power boosts, what can we call it, like energy boosts. I can take those cards. I can do almost every part of the card. I can make every character a card, where it's like Angle, Flap, or Racer Man. I think I'll call them the Racer Man. And there goes any momentum I get. I will say, Fright is not as clear-cut continuity-wise as people kind of are arguing, unfortunately. Because you still have stuff from Fright being referenced in Return to the Pit. Because some part of those storylines were still kind of canon, just unclear what. And there is one body unaccounted for in Return to the Pit. In Return to the Pit, if you try to meet the Pit Keeper like way ahead of time, normally you wait 2 days before this happens. But you can find a single dead kid in the map instead of the 5. So it's unclear if that's just a missing kid who is yet, like, if the other 4 just haven't been killed yet, if that's, like, Andrew on his own or something like that, or if that's, like, just a random dead victim that's also someone who's hit, which is also entirely possible. It's worth remembering. Not, like, Oswald's the only one who could have ever gone to the pit. So we have that body unaccounted for, which might be... Oh, that killed him. I mean, it's worth remembering, while Andrew isn't angrier or more powerful, he's just more ignorant than the other kids. Because he doesn't remember ever having friends, for at least for a long time. So while the missing kids had each other, and they had like half a day and all that to move on, and they have like a goal to work towards, Andrew doesn't, hence why he stays behind. And also, because he's alone, he thinks he has nothing else to stay for, or has nothing else to move on for. Like, he doesn't have the guidance of the missing kid. And he's definitely not powerful, is like the big thing. Remember, like, William still had enough control over himself to get himself to the Fazbear warehouse anyway by tricking Father Arthur. And that was during his torment on the hands of Andrew. So he still had the consciousness and awareness to, like, do stuff. And Andrew also wasn't able to do shit until William was basically burned into near nothing. Andrew is extremely average in terms of his power of soul. Golden Freddy is still, as far as we know, even under Vengeful Andrew or whatever the hell. From what we've seen between the week before, other weird canon bullshit with Golden Freddy in the games, such as teleportation, all the appearances and all that crap, Golden Fry still seems to be the peak of what a soul can do. Maybe the puppet's up there too? That's kind of unclear still. But her powers mostly seem to revolve around helping the other kids. Like, we've never seen... Aside from the weird wailing scream moment in The Stingers, like, the peak capabilities of the puppet aren't that absurd, really, like, all things considered. Like, the puppet's power more seems to be awareness of the missing kid. Consciousness. Whereas, like, Golden Fry is like, nah, teleportation, weird illusions, all kinds of crazy bullshit and psychological manipulation. Tons of hallucinations and other weird crap around them. Like, nothing an individual spirit has done, to my knowledge, has ever physically teleported. And we all joke, like, Bonnie defies the laws of physics and all that shit, but, like, even that feels like a little less than the insane nonsense we've seen Golden Fry pull. And also noting that, yeah, Andrew doesn't actually remember why he hates William anymore. He just knows that he cares so much about that he can't stop. Andrew's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy of a character. He is his own frustration and loneliness manifested. Like, part of what makes Jake so important is the first time he's had a friend or anyone to talk to in as long as he can remember. Which is part of what makes fitting Andrew into the story such a weird thing. Because it's like, how the hell did he not know the other missing kids if he died at Freddy? If there was theories and stuff I tried to do to rectify it, but it's still, like, kind of unclear on certain parts. So, in short, I would argue Return to the Pit is kind of like what we're seeing with Secret of the Mimic, where it's like, clearly some parts of those original short stories are still canon to it, but it's not entirely clear what the limitations or rules behind them are. Return to the Pit kind of has to be canon. And there's a few key scenes that call that out. Or not kind of has to be. I find it incredibly funny. Not only is it the only FNAF Choose Your Own Adventure book that would be non-canon to our knowledge, but I mentioned this last stream. As a commenter called Jaxolotl pointed out, there's a scene in the week before where where Ralph is, I think he's in the kitchen near Susie / Chica, and for some reason he subconsciously calls out to himself the Happy Birthday song, like Happy Birthday, dear. And then when he gets to Happy Birthday, dear whatever person, he says Happy Birthday to Susie. And Chica, despite not actually hearing him specifically, suddenly out of nowhere freaks the fuck out, destroys her cupcake, and runs off. Or destroys a cupcake. It might not be cliche like Carl cupcake or whatever you call it. But it's this weird scene that kind of implies Chica has some trauma related to Susie's birthday, and then Susie was called out in FNAF 6 as being like this one led away for some reason. And then in Return to the Pit, you have the girl with curly hair, no other description given, being called out as giving the cake and all that, which seems to imply to me this like running narrative of the missing kids died on Susie's birthday in the original event. like there is like a running plot line that connects between those two books. And it only really exists if you take the two as equally canon, information-wise. What I really hope we get is another FNAF thing that explains what Eleanor's deal is now. Because that's been really murky and unclear for me. Because I'm not sure exactly what her bit is now. Because in the original short stories, she seemed to be just like another possessed thing that was kind of corrupted by Andrew and Afton. Just a really strong, specific incarnation of that. But then Return to the Pit, it kind of changes her up a bit. And I'm genuinely unsure what that is meant to imply or be about. Like the weird scene with her as a plush, and it might be Eleanor. There's technically room for it just being plush, maybe? A plush described very similarly to both Eleanor and Baby, enough that it's kind of hard to tell if this is just one writer's interpretation of the design versus another. And it's unclear like what the point behind it. I hope, well, it wouldn't make sense for it to be an Escape from the Pizza. I would enjoy some future book or project to explain what her fucking deal was. Because she is one of those points in the plot where I'm like, I don't know what your deal is, but I would actually kind of just take the canon of Eleanor just being Baby with a different name. Like, that's kind of stupid and lame. It sort of throws the Stray Singers into hellish limbo. But that at least would be an origin story. Like, that's a thing. Like, I would take Eleanor as just the agonized remains of Baby from the FNAF 6 5. If that was all there was to it, or something like that, I would run with that. I would be like, okay, good enough, fine, whatever. But there's like, even that implication isn't there. I think it's weird to me that Return to the Pit changes things at all. Because, think, like, let's say that one additional kid that we find on an earlier day is meant to be Andrew, then that's still a change to the original short story. Because the original short story has 6 kids altogether, and the game has 6 kids altogether, and the graphic novel has 6 kids altogether. And I can excuse like 1 or 2 of those being wrong, like the short story is the first version of the story, so there's just room for error there. The graphic novel is just adapting the short story, so there's room for error there. Into the Pit's game version was made years later, and not that far from Return to the Pit development-wise. The idea that that was wrong there is just strange. Like, I'm just wondering, like, how did that happen this long with no clarification? That is the one thing I think I will say overall done. Like, I try to be pretty optimistic about the FNAF series as a whole, with Steel Wool and Baby Cat and even Illumix and Scholastic. But, like, I think a lot of the hate of the later era is completely overblown. I think a lot of the hate of the story is comically overblown. I think, personally, that Vanessa, Gregory, Cassie, Jeremy Help Wanted, and a bunch of the other like modern characters, including the Mimic, are good characters. I would even argue parts of their story are really good. But I think the running quirk I would give of the modern storyline is the original series was deceptively good at giving subtle confirmations and clues about what we were about in a lot of regards. Like, even if you just go game to game to game, FNAF 2 expands a lot upon how the missing kids work, what their connection to the characters and souls are. It debunks a lot of the weirder side theories about what was going on with the animatronics, because like back in FNAF 1, it was still kind of unclear what made the animatronics tick the way they were. Like, were they supernatural because they were grieving the loss of the kids? Were they supernatural because like the general spirits as a whole haunted them? Whereas FNAF 2 directly more implies to us that it's like on a kid-per-kid based character is kind of haunted by kids, more or less. And maybe there's some extra supernatural activity beyond that anyway, but they each kind of have one thing to themselves. And then FNAF 3 also expands on like, hey, no, Purple Guy isn't Bone Guy. He's his own character and his own threat and storyline. And also teaches us more about Victor's Family Diner, which was name dropped in FNAF 2, and kind of gives us some clues on who Golden Freddy is. And FNAF 4 expands upon Victor's Family Diner significantly, as well as the family that will kind of come to own and maintain the franchise as we think of it, in the form of what will be the Afton family. And Sister Location will expand upon that further and further, and it felt like one continuous thing where like each question and thing was answered by the next game, or like showed more about it, on top of whatever the new plot in each game was. And what's weird about the Mimic arc is the order of information being given. So like, holy shit, I'm on first place. On lap 4. I glitched? Like, what? How bad am I doing for that to be the case? Or are the AIs just working the way they're meant to? But like for example, like we get introduced to Glitch Trap. Well, he's probably William, right? Like, why would the evil rabbit with purple eyes not be William? Especially when he's so clearly based on Spring Monitor. And of course, there was like a little bit of speculation we had initially that it was AI, but like there wasn't really, like we didn't know that for background, so we didn't have like the clear confirmation of his own separate character. And then the security breach, and a part of this is the screwed up development order, didn't really help that. It just added like flames to the fire. And then Ruin kind of gets us back on track with the introduction of like the Mimic proper, but then it's like, oh, but then there was also these short stories that explain all of this, but a lot of the implications aren't in the base game. And so like it was not even, I would argue, the release strategy, it was the release order that I think are what screwed up the Mimic arc in many regards. It's like, if Tales from the Pizzaplex came out before Security Breach and the lead up and a hype to it, that would have changed a lot about how we interpret that. I think Fazbear Frights releasing when it did was actually kind of the biggest shot in the foot to Security. Because that meant we were arguing about this whole separate topic in debate that did not really relate to the next release, and then kind of scattered our focus and also started splitting people into camps about what the continuity was and wasn't. Even if I like a lot of parts of Fazbear Frights at their core, I think it was the wrong series to release at that point in time. If that makes sense. Um, oh. Because if you think about, like, the reason we even have the book debate was because of the weird anomalies in After Frights. The parts of the story that didn't make a lot of sense there were what had the splashing repercussions for how we interpreted the story afterwards. Whereas if Tales from the Pizzaplex came out the gates swinging, saying, this is set in the world of the newest games, and it was just like, step 1, mimic, immediately right away, this is what we're talking about. Step 2, this is the guy who made the VR games from Hellblade 1. Okay, so we know this is in the continuity and all that. Yada yada. Like, step 2, like, here's this Pizzaplex. First, like, step 3, like, here's this Pizzaplex thing. And we get this origin story for the mimic and how its animatronic AI behaves and all that. Videos get me saying they're a work night shift. There are some series of stuff like that. Like, Game Grumps is kind of my comfort series at this point, or like the show at this point, where it's just like, if I just need noise to be in the background while I work on something, it's the best for that. So I can. That's one of the kind of cooler things about doing entertainment, and it's part of why I always like creating stuff over traditional job is like, yeah, maybe being a neurosurgeon or a lawyer or something like that would be a more beneficial job, and that also can save people's lives in both cases. Like, you're not doing nothing either. But for me, like, some of the biggest impact you can have on a day-to-day life is basic entertainment and helping people through stuff, especially in the world right now. It's a reason where I kind of refuse to make completely pessimistic characters, and I refuse to have such a fucking defeatist attitude with certain stories and narratives that's like, oh, it's all just bad and sucks. Like, every writer's trying their own to do something impressive or interesting, or at the very least get you to think or be happy, or be tense or scared or whatever. Like, they're trying, and it's not fair to the writer to inherently assume they just suck. Because parts of the story are unclear. Like, yes, stories can be flawed while still being good. I do think there's... Ooh. I do think there's decent odds that we can see William or Henry, even just in passing. I would love a Canon 3D model of Game William. Even if it's just like a picture on a wall or something like that. I think that would be cool. Like, he doesn't need to have like a involved character in the story. Just a kind of reminder of who these people are and how they connect. And even just saying Henry's name in canon in the games would be nice. Because while I would argue you don't need to know his name for the story to work and make some level of sense still, it's like there's no harm in just saying it outright. I don't think we've ever had his name just directly stated in my game, even to this date, all these years later. I actually wouldn't mind if, yeah, William or Henry were the ones who technically defeated the Mimic or helped us defeat him. Because I think if any two characters would be the ones to pull that off, physically or mentally, it would be one of the two like them. But we've seen William outsmart animatronics way more dangerous than he technically is himself. And we've seen Henry outsmart even William. it is weird that Rockstar didn't include a picture of especially of Henry. I can see why the modern Fazbear Entertainment might not be fond of either of them. You have theories like Henry being convicted for whatever like William did and all that. But then you also have like the fact that he's the one who dissolved the company in the original first place. So the legacy behind him might not be great per se. And William has it even worse with being like this legendary, like cryptid character, Springtrap, which at least in the world of Tales from the Flex is like a kind of well-known urban legend. Even if it isn't like treated as like a reality or fact, it's what people think or know about. At least in the modern day. So like I can see the two of them not being like shown as equal, but it still is kind of weird. Especially since they have canon designs apparently into the Fit's game version. Which is the weirdest thing to me, because I really hope it's just a like using continuity situation with Return to the Fit into the Fit's game. I would be really upset if Into This game isn't canon at some level. It's like, okay, so it's a world. Because here's the thing: if it's not canon, that means we have a game in this game series that is not canon to the other games, features characters directly from the game in the form of illustrations and clues, references certain like iconic imagery and characters from the game. But it is also not in the game. Such as like general design animatronics, Gold Freddy, other like world building stuff that kind of lines up with other stuff we've been told about before. And all that, but it's not canon. No, you don't understand. It's its own continuity. Or whatever the fuck, or the hypothetical alternative would be. But that would really annoy me. That's just arbitrary. Like there's no reason for the choose your own adventure book to be the canon version over the game. You know, especially like because it pays homage to so many things from the games already. Like almost every mini game in of the secret mini game in whatchamacallit, in its game version. Reference a minigame from FNAF 2. You have Fetch kind of representing Save Them, and also a little bit of Follow Me. You have Eleanor's minigame resembling a little bit of Give Cake, but mostly whatchamacallit, Give Gifts. Resembles that the most, I would argue. And then you have Count the Ways resembling Foxy's Go Go Go. It's annoying that it's paying homage to so many things from the games, and then clearly Vega Cat thought they were developing something in the world building games for a while, because Van knew what these several buildings prior to the release bit. But it's very frustrating. It's like it's so close and yet would not be in the continuity. And I'm not even sure why it wouldn't. Like, why would Scott not want to be in the continuity? Like, development-wise, it doesn't make sense to make a game that wasn't or isn't. That's dumb. Yeah, I don't know why it's called Return to Pit either. The name doesn't make sense. It's a retelling, not a sequel. Okay. Which I mean, we all knew before it came out for a bit. That was part of the description, but it's like, why? Why not just have it? What's the point of it not being? Or not being. Oh, what's the point of doing the story again a third time? Third and a half time. That's the part I don't get, is like, why did we need another chapter? Why not just get it right the first time? Yeah, it could be that we're returning as readers, and that's a joke, but that's kind of a dumb bit. Oh, my monitor turned off. That was weird. Okay, I get the bit of like, oh, to sell more books or whatever. That's a common thing people say with FNAF. Why not just make a new story? Why not just make another Choose Your Own Adventure book? You want to set around FNAF 6. There's still a lot of mysterious shit around what was going on with Henry before that. You could have easily done one day. Why? Like, there's a lot of original content put into Return to the Pit already. So it's not like, oh, we're saving time and energy by reusing a story. It's something not really. If you're going to change half the story anyway, it's not like, you might as well have just made a new story. I could kind of see an argument that, like, there's a Frights version of the story, which is canon to its own continuity or whatever, and then the Return to the Pit is like the game continuity version, but why not do that with the game? Why? I wonder if that route's faster. I wonder if there's a thing you can do there. Oh yeah, cryptid story about the FNAF 6 game. There's still some interesting stuff about like the prior guards to Sister Location that could have been great for fleshing out the world and story of that era. Honestly, Dittophobia could have been a Choose Your Own Adventure story. If being completely honest, like, if they're gonna say, hey, there was a what the hell? My controller turned off there for a second. What happened? And that's what I'm saying. It's like, if you're going to redo the story of Into the Pit to be better in the game universe, why not do that with the game? Why do that with a Choose Your Own Adventure book? And if you're going to call it Return to the Pit, or if you're going to do a Choose Your Own Adventure book that treads the same storyline again, why not just make a sequel to the game? That's one of the things I just personally don't really understand at all. I really want to see if I can nail this shortcut 5 times. That's why I'm restarting over. The Choose Your Own Adventure book, it's also like, yeah, as Sears pointed out, like a set from the missing kids perspective. I would love a Choose Your Own Adventure book where you play as Freddy / Gabriel. Gabriel, I can kind of do with Jeremy and Jeremy not getting a bit of characterization, and Fritz sort of being left up in the air a smidge. Because Alani already kind of gets washed off attention from being considered Scott's scariest character, from being Scott Clarion the scariest character, and also Spring Bonnie existing, so he already kind of has some tangential connect, like, according to there. Foxy's generally a fan favorite as a whole. But, like, Freddy, it's like, he's kind of infamous for how, despite it being the series named after him, he actually doesn't get a lot of focus himself in a lot of the games and stories. So I would really like a short story where it's maybe set in FNAF 2's location that covers what was kind of going on and save them. Because that's one of the few times, and the series dropped this at a certain point, that implied Gabriel was a little different from the other 4 missing kids. Or I should say the other 3 kind of beater characters of FNAF. Because, you know, Golden Freddy's obviously distinct, Charlie's obviously distinct, but Gabriel was also completely wandering around, following Charlie and listening to her, and it implies, and also in FNAF 1, he's the only character who doesn't go backwards unless he's just waiting for you to, like, close an open door. What the hell is going on? So it implies to me overall that, like, he was meant to be smarter, or, like, kind of the big leader of the bunch for a bit, with only the oddballs that were the Puppet and Golden Freddy kind of outpacing him. That implication is kind of dropped after FNAF 2. Like, FNAF 3 doesn't really imply anything of the sort with him at all. FNAF 4 doesn't really focus on the missing kids much, so it doesn't get a lot of room to imply that. FNAF 6, like, FNAF 5 was the same way, and 6 is also, like, he's part of the amalgam and goo and all that. And he kind of keep the torch going because Freddy is the form they take as a bunch together. So it's a little bit there, but the core concept of Freddy being like the leader and of the basic four characters is not super prevalent anymore. I would love a story that kind of went into that and showed Gabriel as like this struggling, like he's supposed to be the leader because he's Freddy Fazbear. That's his character in this bit, and we know their characters have pretty large impacts on how they behave. But like struggling to be that because at his core he's still a kid. There's a lot of narrative to explore there. I don't think ever really will. And I would never say, oh, what if we got a game or a short story or a choose your own adventure book or whatever that covers Phone Guy and gives him a name with a bit more background in the family. Yeah, he's like, I guess, yeah, he is kind of implied to be a bit more of a leader in the week before, so it's not completely dropped. But I wish that was explored more. I want Gabriel to feel like the leader of those four, and Cassidy, like, I think if I were to, I've been asked this a bunch of, like, how would I rewrite FNAF if I did it? I think the main rewrites I would do is I would condense some characters down into one. Like, personally, while I like Charlie and the Bike Victim as separate characters, I think there's easily a version of the story that would work solidly well with the puppet being one character, being the Bite Victim. And instead of having him be bit, he's left behind by Michael while he's chatting with his friends, or something like that, or he gets thrown out of Fredbear's Family Diner, and then William kills him or something like that, or something kills him out in the rain, like the elements of time. And that causes him to be the puppet, and that's why he's so much more intelligent, is he isn't bound by his rage or grief of a killer, he's just upset that he was abandoned that way. He doesn't want other people to abandon and feel alone like that. Like, that's such a simple character to it, or something like that. And Cassidy is the one I would kind of like mash in a little bit of Andrew and what seems to be being Cassidy's like character together, like have this character who isn't apathetic or careless, but just isn't part of the group in the same way, feels weirdly isolated and like left alone and set aside. And/or because like learns about the past of Freddy's and what William's done and just like can't go on knowing everything he's done or something. Like there's interesting characters you can do I don't think we'll ever get, and it's not a bad thing per se. I don't think the story that is there is bad. It's just, like, if I had my hands on it, it would look differently, and that's the case for as if almost every FNAF fan had their hands in the story. They would change some part of it. I think Michael is one of the few characters I would change almost nothing. Narrative. I think, well, I'm not going to pretend Michael's like the perfect home run character, of the story, I would say he's the one I would change the least in the overall story. I think the only thing I might do is make his agency in the story a little bit more clear. Because I've seen people argue, it's like, oh, Michael doesn't actually do much in the story, aside from go from place to place and be scared or whatever. Which I don't really agree with that, but I can see why you might feel that in the story. So, like, I guess I would make it more clear what his plans or perspective were on things. More consistently, I think, well, I don't need him to be like a wisecracking, constantly joking character vocally. I do think like having him talk every now and then wouldn't be that bad. Aside from this one monologue, you know. Because it is kind of weird in Facilitation how he doesn't say anything at all in that entire game, despite characters openly talking back and forth to him. Like, I think it would almost make more sense for him to talk to Elizabeth and stuff in that game than he doesn't. And I'm not sure, like, what in universal reason he's not talking back to her. Because when he's not talking to Hannian, I get it, because it's an automated system. There's nothing he can say back to him that would contribute to the story. And aside from, like, a joke or two, or, like, random lore information. But, like, with Baby, he can easily talk to her and they can interact. Even just, like, a what do you mean kind of line, or, like, I don't believe it. Or, like, even just, like, muffled screaming at the spring lock thing. I guess I would do that, but it's like, yeah, I don't need it. Facilitation doesn't bother me because he doesn't talk. I honestly think most of my rewrites would just boil down to stuff with the Vi victim. I don't dislike him as a character, I just think he's the roughest part of the core story. And likewise, I think Andrew's the second roughest, maybe tied with roughest. Because Vi victim kind of fits himself into the world decently. But there is some weird, funky. Oh my. Parts of his story. Exactly, like, maybe just ask Michael questions and he never answers them. And I don't know why. Because there's stuff like, there's some silent protagonists who have reason to be silent despite not being canonically true. Like, Shell in Portal canonically doesn't say anything to GLaDOS because she doesn't want to reward GLaDOS' saving. And same thing with Wheat. She just doesn't have anything worthwhile to say to them, doesn't really care to respond. And she knows in a way GLaDOS wants a reaction, but wants her to care. And all that. And Wheatley's the same way. Whereas, like, Michael, I'm not sure what the bit is for him staying silent. I get some FNAF 1, he has nothing to say either. He's like, what would he say? Him talking with Ralph would be nice, but the series didn't really have voice acting. And also, like, they're pre-recorded. Like, Ralph's calls were left behind before. So it's like, what is he going to say to Ralph? The other series that I think is the most notable for, like, why is our character mute? That I don't think makes a lot of sense in execution. The original release of what do you call it? Pop Goes. Pop Goes, like, our character not talking makes a little bit of sense with the excusing universe that these are also pre-recorded calls, just with the pre-recorded responses and all that. But I think maybe this was like an indie thing of like, oh, I don't have a voice actor, a separate person to do the voice of our player character. I think there's also a thing in the first game that we're like a robot or something like that, or some weird lore like that. But like that's the one where it's like if you're gonna have interactions between your character and the person over the phone, why not just commit to it? In Freddy's Bizarre Wonderland, which I'm thinking is probably going to be a comic at this point. Maybe if a comic is popular, I can get people to help me make fan games or something like that, where I just do most of the writing and character design. Because the other areas of game development are where I'm completely far behind. Like, I can plan a lot of a game. I just can't actually code one right now. I've never really pulled, like, there's something about trying to learn the code that just doesn't stick with me or stay with me whenever I try. I've tried several times. Maybe I just need a hard commit to something, but for now, most of my resources in game development go to the concepts and ideas of the game. Sometimes art and characters. So with Freddy's Bizarre Wonderland, I want the main character Max for her to be vocal. So like, the only reason she doesn't talk most of the gameplay is because Springs, the kind of main antagonist mastermind of the whole thing, doesn't want people to talk over them or scream or anything like that. It's supposed to be a professional experimenting environment. Like, there's this one, like, because I don't know how Freddy's Bizarre Wonderland will turn out whenever I work on it eventually, or like what it will be like. I'll just like kind of mildly spoil something. Like there's a scene. Max is not a night guard. Max is a kidnapped victim being experimented on, fulfilling the role that the night guards originally portrayed. Because Springs is a psychopath trying to recreate William's work and everything that went into it. And that includes like, well, of course I've done all the missing kids stuff. I've kidnapped kids. I've proven how that works. And I've gotten pretty good control and understanding of it. I just need to know everything William did, and so I'm going to keep doing experiments. And one of those is, what about all the legendary night guards that happened and all that shit? Does that have a bearing? And the other main purpose of the supposed night guard slash victim angle is to keep the animatronics and stuff sort of entertained or focused on something. Because if they are just left alone at night all night, they will eventually collaborate enough to try and make a breakaway and get away from it. The night guard is a distraction to give them a false goal to work for. The first interaction Max actually has with Springs just straight up pulls a gun to her head. And it's like, I'm gonna kill you if you keep trying to talk to me and talk over me. And that's the reason Max is like quiet for the rest of the game and only speaks when absolutely necessary. It's like, you know, Springs is a psychopath. A psychopath who has convinced themselves they have more morals or more of a justified reason than William did, but is still also a psychopath in their own way. And like the only character Max ends up really talking to is kind of the golden Freddy of that storyline. How I explain them? Like he is effectively the golden Freddy of that storyline, just of that set of kids. But I'll see where that goes eventually. I do have an idea of how I want to do it as a comic and how I would do it as a game. The stories would be very similar, just what happens each night would be a little different, and some of the pacing would be a little different for how the story plays out. Because I think the comic version would be more about the cast of characters as a whole. Whereas the game is a lot more about Max and Foxy. and getting a bit more of the characters on the side. And if that makes sense, because a lot of it would be basically a very classic FNAF 1 style FNAF game, where it's like you're literally strapped to a chair with the monitors. Your goal is just to survive as long as possible, but it would have a lot of a focus on scripted events and certain interactions. Like, one bit I would want to have is on the night that Chica is introduced, I'd want to have this bit where you're guaranteed at 5 a.m. or at 6 a.m. to lose to her. Like, well, she'll break into your office, and then because Freddy's just playing along with the game because he brings assistance, he's sort of the baby to, or the Elizabeth/baby to Spring's William. Freddy actually grabs Chica and throws her to the side to prevent her from killing you because you won. You made it 6 a.m., so you're allowed to win, even if a lot of the other animatronics aren't playing with those rules. In that way, Freddy's a bit of a stickler for like the game, the bit to it. Because he's also a sadistic prick, and the game isn't. He's kind of had his fun and fill of hurting people normally, and he wants to have more rules and order to it. A game isn't fun if anyone can cheat or break the rules at any time. Do you plan on making like a remake of your When Fazbear Fights Children video? I don't know. I don't know if that's a topic really worth reverting to again, because it would be more of some minor corrections based on some of the questionable information from Canon. Because it basically just narrows the timeline a little bit and reinforces that whatever fights was written, it had to be well after Ultimate Custom Night. Or not well after. It had to be closer to what Scott was talking about timeline. I don't have a lot to change in that video off the top of my head. And I don't really feel a need to remake that video because I feel like whatever points I was going to try to argue with that video kind of passed. I have a lot of like bits planned for Freddy's Bizarre Wonderland as a whole. Because like there's one of the gags I want to do is I want to have 3 jump scares for every character. What I would call like a live jump scare, which is one where they attack you in the office in real time from the door or whatever angle they're coming from. And then there's one jump scare where if you're looking at your monitor when they enter the room, you would like put it down and then they would jump scare you, or they would pull the monitor down to attack you. And then there would be like one just like weird wild card jump scare that completely throws you for a loop to whatever you expect the jump scare to be. So for example, Freddy's main jump scare is like him like his hands reaching through the door and then slunking and pulling himself in because he's bigger than the door itself. So he has to kind of like pull himself through and crash down. And then he turns at you and like charges at you suddenly after like kind of winking. And then his monitor jump scare would be just like him pulling down the monitor and attacking you, something very basic. And then he would have his special jump scare would be him tapping on the top of a monitor to get your attention so you put it down yourself and then attack you. And, like, the puppet, I'm going to give all kinds of weird properties. Like, I want to lean a little bit into the bizarre nature of the name and the set of characters. Like, it's the Warlock puppet. It's what I called this version of her. So, like, one of her animations is her strangling you with, the marionette strings. One would be, like, shocking you to death with the electricity that runs through the costume or the mask and all that. And then there would be one, like, traditional FNAF 2 style fly at you, what the hell is going on jump scare. Like, there's a few ideas I've been playing. I also want, like, something I want more than anything, in whatever FNAF game I would eventually work on or anything like that. The thing that kind of matters the most to me is bringing back FNAF 1's random events and stuff, and tripling down. I would want at almost any given time something weird to happen. That it doesn't even need to be gameplay related. It can just be like a cockroach like crawling across your monitor while you're looking at it. That's enough to throw people off. Like, think about how many times in a game or something like where you're watching a playthrough of something where like steam just bursts out of a vent or a pipe or something like that, and that manages to get people off guard. It's like sometimes you don't even need an actual scary jump scare to happen. It just needs to be something that you don't expect or aren't comfortable with understanding or experiencing at that moment of given time. And I want to throw those at you. It's like something weird will just happen, and you're not always sure whether it has a gameplay reason or not. And ideally, some of those would have gameplay reasons. Like one of those I want is just be there's like this low chance that a character is like looking at your screen and then it breaks if you stay there too long, sort of like the haywire mechanic in FNAF AR and the animatronics. But you never exactly know when they're going to be doing it. And it will be like a low chance. It would be like a 1 in 50 times, like looking at them kind of thing. Just so you're never quite comfortable with the core gameplay. Because that's one of the trickiest things about FNAF games as a whole, I feel like. And this is, Five Minutes of Candies is the one where I felt the biggest about this happening. Where you get super comfortable with how that game operates. And that holds it back a lot gameplay-wise. I just like love the idea of this weird like setup where nothing is exactly comfortable or logical to you. Like anything can almost happen at any moment from your perspective. Because that's what I think makes the first few FNAF games feel so special when you're initially playing them. And part of what makes them so not scary nowadays is when you're playing a modern FNAF 1 game or 2 game or something like that. Or even just a game in that style or like a fan game, you know so much of what's capable and what's possible in the game engine, why things happen the way they do. I want a game that brings you back to feeling like this was an actual space where anything could happen. Because that's what it felt like to me playing a lot of those initial games. Like initial FNAF 1, 2, and 3, it felt like literally anything could happen in this hospital at any point. And part of that was like kind of a childish and naivety about how horror games work in the engine and all that, but that's part of what made it special. Another thing I would want to do is I would want to make it clear that almost every character has a different sort of philosophy behind how they move and act. I like when characters have their own different personalities and feels to each other in the games, especially when they're like running threats, even if they, at their core, achieve very similar outcomes. FNAF 1 kind of set that up, and I would want to expand upon that a lot. Because like FNAF 1, like Bonnie moves erratically and kind of arbitrarily, but still, like there is a rule to it. It's just a lot harder to parse out, whereas Chica moves very linearly and predictably. And then Foxy like suddenly sprints at you as after a lot of build-up, and then Freddy kind of slowly methodically moves at you in a straight line without any sign of really stopping other than when you're looking at him. Like, he's a very red light, green light kind of character. And that's his own interesting little mechanic. And I think I would honestly just rip that almost one-to-one for Freddy Son, where it's like, the bit is just look at him as much as you can and that will slow him down. The complications I would change to it is I would make it go anywhere in the... Ooh, why am I so super there? The changes I would make is I would make it so it can go anywhere in the building, theoretically. So, as long as it moves towards you. So you don't know which hallway he's going to go down at any time. Your only safety is that he cannot get into the vents, so you don't have to worry about him going there. Whereas with Chica, it's like she would kind of represent your erratic character, the one who can kind of go anywhere, anytime for no real reason. And I think I would keep a sort of Springtrap style mechanic where it's like you're trying to just slow her down and keep her from caring enough about you to do it. She will just sometimes arbitrarily go at your doors for a while, but you can slow her down with whatever your like audio lure can. I think the main thing I would have is like I would have a few stations that have like food on them or something like that, like there's a few tables that you'll find at the start of the night, and you get to like shock her every time she's about to eat from one of those, and then that gets her to run away somewhere else. And so you're never exactly sure where she is, but you know where you don't want her to be, and you know when you want to punish her for being but sometimes you kind of want her to stay eating food because that means she's not eating you. However, and so there's like a benefit to kind of randomizing it all. And all that. Low floor. Sometimes this game does just kind of force you to do donuts. Like, physics are just weird in this game, and kind of what makes it kind of a fun kart racer is it's kind of nonsense if I'm honest, and nonsense you kind of get used to very quickly. Okay, I'm going for a very clear plan and like route. I think I've done enough that I get what the optimal route is. But I know I can do something. If the game drifts the way I plan it. Yeah, like Chica's whole thing is like, you're just trying to stun her and then block her when she does approach you. And ideally, she approaches you as little as possible. And most of your power goes into blocking Freddy. And then Foxy is like this kind of ever-changing wild card that you have to adapt to. Like, he's intentionally changing what the fundamental mechanics behind his character are throughout the nights. And sometimes it would kind of be like a Rockstar Foxy situation where he's sometimes outright beneficial to you. Like he might sabotage, like he might place more food on the tables or anything like that. You might not want to do anything to try and stop it. You just need to pay attention to what he's actually doing every now and then. You get a sense of like which Foxy you're kind of dealing with. And then Mangle, I think, would be sort of our vent goblin kind of character. Like, you can kind of approach anywhere. It would sort of act as Freddy too, just one you can't stop but moves faster. Sort of closer to what your Bonnie or Chica might be in FNAF 1, where it's like approaching quickly, leaves quickly. You don't really need to watch them, you just need to be ready for it. I think the only difference I would make about Mangle is I would make it so she sprints and that last stretch every time. Like, if Mangle's in the vents, she's barreling at you in that scene. It's the same thing with the hall or anything like that. But it functions well like a normal character for the rest of the game. And then the puppet, I think, would just be kind of gets agitated the more the night goes on, and you have to flash or use the music box or something to keep her at bay. And slow her down. So that's kind of your Foxy equivalent mechanic. And the other kind of... The one I'm still refining a bit to be a little different is Bomb. I have like one particular bit in mind with Bonnie, I just don't know how logical it is gameplay. My main idea is that you have to shock him every now and then to prevent him from breaking himself free of his cell. Like he's trapped on a prison cell. And once he's broken free from his cell, he is this non-stop, nearly unstoppable threat for the rest of the night. Sort of like Foxy in FNAF 4. But I'm not sure how well that gels with the rest of the gameplay loop. I guess it could just be like make him truly like FNAF 1 Fox, or you don't even need to check on him most of the time. You just need to be maintaining that shock on his collar at all times. Close. Yeah, the worst FNAF is I don't think there's anything that crosses it. Thing. I think on this specific chunk, I kind of have to do too many turbos because like it feels physically awkward to try and convert it all into one canvas. This part you can kind of pull off the one turbo. And you have to go for the power module there. I don't think there is another power module now. The thing I'm sort of realizing on this run in particular is how many times I was screwing myself over by biting off more than I could chew, speed-wise or performance-wise. The last lap. I think I got this. I think I'm on the pace I want. Fuck, that threw me off. I'll lose this run to that balloon going off because I'm like 1 second behind or something like that. That'll be infuriating. Oh, 410. Okay, I need to end the stream here. I need to go back to bed. And I've reached 2 hours, but whatever. Anyway, I think I'll say bye here, and well,